daughters. What an honor it was to serve beside such a faithful follower of Christ and leader. He truly lived out the mission of OCF, which is to engage military leaders in biblical fellowship and growth to equip them for Christ-like service at the intersection of faith, family, and profession. Karl's ribbon rack tells an incredible story, but the legacy he leaves behind tells an even better story. I heard a song recently by Mark Schultz titled "Live Like You're Loved." That reminded me of how Karl would make everyone feel. Live like you're loved by the Lord up above. Spread out your wings and never give up. Because you can do anything, be who you meant to be. Always remember to dream and keep your head up. And live like you're loved by the Lord of the whole universe. Loved by the maker of heaven and earth. Loved by the Father again and again. Loved with love without end. I had the greatest honor at his funeral, and that was to perform honors. One of the toughest things to do, but also one of the biggest blessings that God has provided me to do is do those honors for people that are so close to me. I don't know if you guys are involved with OPRs, your Officer Performance Reports yet, something we have to do on an annual basis that kind of highlights what we did in a year, but I ended at the funeral just by saying Karl has the best OPR, and that's opening up, going into heaven and God saying well done. So that's what we strive to do here. And on that note, I want to introduce Colonel Goodman, one of Karl and Minnie's friends here, and he'll let you know how we meant to go.
Is up here the best place for me?
Yeah, what do you guys think?
Down there.
Up here or on the back side over there?
Over there?
Go for it. Yeah, okay. We'll probably have one or two more students coming in, so just to let you know.
Well, Karl Bakke. I've known him for about 6 months, but I've known him for about 47 years. Because I didn't know, I couldn't put a face at the time on someone who did something so special for my friends. But now I'm delighted that the loop is closed, and I got to meet him and shake his hand and spend some time with him and understand that. And I will tell you before I go any further, in my tour in Vietnam, he performed the bravest act that I can imagine, and I'll explain it to you in a few minutes. I had never seen courage like that displayed so vividly to me. Just a little background on how I got to know Karl and visit with him. My roommate Dave Hedges was shot down in Vietnam on February 25th, 1971. And his picture's right over here, and also in some of these news articles. And by the way, I'm going to go out to visit him in Montana in about a week and a half. Dave and I were great friends. We spent a lot of time together. And we had another officer in my squadron, 40th Attack Fighter Squadron in Phuket. I was in Phuket, Republic of Vietnam. His name's Ron Fletcher, and he was building a documentary, essentially, of this flight, the Cobra 2-3 flight, where my two buddies were shot down. I'll give you a little bit of background on how that happened in a couple minutes. But Ron was writing a documentary, and one day he sent me an email, and he said, we finally located the helicopter pilot in Jolly Green 6-5 that rescued Doc and Gorgo. That was their call signs. And oh, by the way, he lives in Minneapolis. Well, holy mackerel, that was a wonderful opportunity for me, so I called Karl up right away. And we shared a sub together at the sub shop up on, once again, I said that I knew him for a couple months, but I knew him for 47 years. All of a sudden now, I could put a face on a hero to me. Special occasion. About a month after that, I went to a 12th Attack Fighter Wing. I was in the 12th Attack Fighter Wing, 40th Attack Fighter Squad at Phuket in the Republic of Vietnam. And we had a reunion out in Tucson. And as part of that reunion, we talked about Karl, because now we knew about his situation. And when I got back from that reunion, I got a hold of Karl and Eunice again, and we made arrangements for him to be the guest speaker at our reunion in Dayton in 2020, another year and a half. So I can tell you this. We will talk about Karl an awful lot at that reunion. We'll raise our glasses to Karl because he has a special place in our hearts. Special place in our hearts. Okay, at Phuket. Phuket was in Two Corps, Vietnam. A beautiful base. It was a very nice place to be. But on 25th of February 1971, it was a pretty sad place for me. I was working on the command post on an additional duty, and it's not really important what that was. That was what's called the frag shot. And all of a sudden you start hearing a little drift from the command post guys that were within arm's reach. We just had somebody get out, an airplane go down. So I went roaring over there to find out who it was. And lo and behold, it was Cobra 2-3, and I looked at the schedule board, and it's my roommate, Dave Hidditch, and it's backseater Tom McLaughlin, Bakke and Gordo. And I tell you, some emotions at a time like that run through you pretty hot and heavy. And I went back to my room, and that evening when I finished work, I went back to my room, and I walked into his room. Our rooms were joined by a door that was always open, because we were in and out of each other's life all the time. And I looked at a picture of he and his wife, and the picture started to blur real quickly. It was blurring because the tears were flowing pretty. When you lose a friend like that, especially when you feel that he probably was vaporized in a fireball because the airplane was shot out right from underneath him, it's quite a jolting experience. And so one of the first things I did after I got my eyes taken care of is I walked back in my room and I picked up my little New Testament that my first wife had given me, and I wrote an annotation in it. I'll read it to you. It said, Dave Hidditch, Tom McLaughlin, shot down in Laos 25 February 71, and then the next day rescued 26 February. Many prayers answered. I've only put about 4 entries in this Bible. That situation, my late wife, marrying my late wife, the day my late wife died, and so things that go in here are pretty important to me. So that particular night, I spent obviously some time in prayer. At that time, we thought that they had died in fireball. So, and I'll explain how that happened in a second. But when I went to bed with a very heavy heart. What I didn't know was at the same time at Da Nang Air Base, about 100 miles north of us, there was a captain that was going to bed with concern, but he had been honored because he was selected to be the lead helicopter pilot on the recovery effort. And the recovery effort was the largest, to that time was the largest recovery effort in the Vietnam War. There were over 70 airplanes involved. And the first day they had airplanes stacked up halfway to the moon, waiting to go in and either put bombs in the enemy or smoke or something to try to create a window where the rescue pilots could get in and lift these 2 guys out. And they had gone in the middle of one of the hottest areas you can imagine. There were thousands of North Vietnamese. There were thousands of South Vietnamese troops, ARVN, the Republic of Vietnam forces. And they met in this huge clash right in southeastern Laos. And at the time, a fire support base of ARVN was being totally overrun by North Vietnamese. There were thousands of troops in the area. Well, Doc and Gordo went up there as a flight of 2, Cobra 2-2 flight. Actually, they were 2-3. And they had been asked to knock out 2 tanks that were trying to pulverize this fire support base. Well, in Fighter Pilot School 101, one of the things you never want to mess with is a tank, because in order to put ordnance on a tank, you've got to fly right down its gun line. And they made 1 pass, and the forward air controller said, we really need to knock down this other one. The first pass was pretty scary. It was a low altitude pass, probably got down to a couple hundred feet. So they released the ordnance because they wanted to put it right on target. And so as they pulled off, Doc asked Gordo in the back seat. He said, there's a high likelihood we're not going to survive this next pass. Should we take that chance? He was just getting a commitment. And Gordo And I'll excuse my French, but he said, what the hell are we over here for? And so they prepped for their second pass. The second pass, just as they're pulling off the target, the mirrors on both sides filled with an orange fireball, and they had absolutely no time to think, but just get out. Probably 200 or 300 people on the ground. Both of them had about one swing in the parachute before they hit into a small area. Dock on one side, the tree line, Gord on the other side. Okay? So that kind of sets the scene. It was February in Laos, and it gets kind of cold at night, so just to give you an idea, it was raining. That curtailed the rescue efforts for the first afternoon. It was raining, there was cloud cover, there's North Vietnamese all over the place, and these two guys are trying to, in two different places, trying to get into a trench deep enough to be undiscovered, but it was only about a 10-inch deep trench. Dave Hedge said that several times during the night, when he was starting to get hypothermia because he was wet and cold, North Vietnamese walked within 10 feet of him. They didn't see him because they were looking up, or they were looking horizontally at all the 50 cal fire and guns going off and the cacophony of all these things happening. They didn't think to look down right at their feet where there's American Navy. So you can tell that it wasn't exactly a delightful night. Right here I have a picture of an A-1E. A-1E is an old propeller airplane, and they typically in a rescue would manage the rescue effort. So Sandy Lee was the rescue commander. Sometime in the afternoon of 25th, he called off the rescue because the weather's coming in. They couldn't get airplanes in, they couldn't get a helicopter in, and the area was absolutely too hot to make a recovery attempt. Meanwhile, Karl's back in his bed, and he's feeling honored, but you can imagine what was going through his mind. He knew it was going to be a huge rescue effort. If the pilots survived the night, it's going to be a huge rescue effort the next day. And on one hand, he had to be prepared for it, and you know Karl as well as I do, he was having some direct communications with his Lord. You know that, I know that. I was too. I mean, we were all looking skyward to try to get some assistance in this thing. The next morning dawned early, and I had a flight to the same area the next morning. And so we were all anxious about that, because especially since you lost an airplane the day before. So as I was briefing my flight, myself and the wingman, as I was briefing the flight, the door cracked open and it said, the guys are still alive. That's a good start to your day. So we went out and blasted off. We're headed to the target area in about 40 miles out, and we thought they probably would die any minute because they're just flat getting overrun. About 40 miles out from the target, I heard a radio call on guard, which is an emergency frequency, and it was a helicopter pilot, or I think it might have been Sandy Lee. It was probably one of the A-1E guys. Said, Cobra 2-3 Alpha, front seater Alpha, back seater Bravo. 2-3 Alpha, how copy? Scratch, scratch, scratch. A little bit of static, which 40 miles out probably is emergency radio. So we knew that front seater was alive. Second or two later, 2-3 Bravo, how do you copy? Scratch, scratch, scratch. She does. So we knew that they had survived, but it was still a desperate situation. I will tell you at that instant, my roomie, my winging and I pulled the noses up and did a perfect in-place aileron roll with 6,000 pounds of bombs on it. Because it was worth a celebration in that instant, but we knew the situation was desperate. Meanwhile, about 14 miles north of the target in I'd say a safe area, no place was safe over there, but here's Karl in his Jolly Green with his crew. I get a crew of three, pretty sure, three. And they're in orbit. And they're there with Jolly 6-6, and he was his backup. Karl was the mission commander of the rescue effort. And I know Karl. I've known him for a while, but I've known what he did for a lot of years. And I imagine he had a firm grasp on that helicopter, but he could not wait to jam those throttles to the wall and get headed down there. So meanwhile, the Sandys, their job was to fly low through this pass There were 4 of them, and their job with all this ordnance they had on was to keep the bad guys' heads down as well as they could. So they did this for a couple hours, and they have a lot of on-target time, so they did it for a couple hours. And what Sandy Lee was looking for is the perfect time when he could call Karl to make a mad dash to the target and rescue these guys. So they got kind of the point of no return, where if we don't call him in right now, we're not going to make it. So, and he gave Karl the go. And Karl mentioned to me when we were up the subway, he said, I think I got through those throttles through the firewall. And they drilled in there at about 145 knots. And I will tell you, when we were doing target work like that in F4s, we probably had about 500 knots. So I just can't imagine going in that much of a threat area at that low speed. So Sandy Lee led him down to the pass and about a half a mile from Dave, said he asked him to pop a smoke, the guys on the ground. Pop a smoke. The bad news with that is the helicopter can see your smoke, the bad guys can see your smoke. So he did it the last second. Karl zeroed right into the smoke, went and hovered at 75 feet for about 3 to 3.5 minutes. And that's the amount of time it took to drop a tree penetrator, which is like a great big spike with pedals that fold down you could sit on, and then a belt you can wrap around yourself. And so they lowered the tree penetrator, Dave climbed on, and he told me later that he expected the circus ride of his life as the helicopter started yanking him up and then flying over to the other guy. He thought he was going to get a real whirlwind ride. As a matter of fact, Karl sat right there until he was yanked in the door, which I can't imagine that act of bravery. I can't imagine. All kinds of ground fire, 50 cal zipping by. I mean, it was a nasty situation. So then they hop a tree line. Here's Gorgo over here. Gorgo is a fullback. He weighed about, you can see he's a big guy, he weighed about 240, and he said he never ran so fast in his life. Probably put him on the Vikings if he could run the line. But at any rate, he made it to the tree penetrator. Meanwhile, the gunners are they're zeroing in on this helicopter. And Dave said it was like being in a pachinko machine inside. I mean, there's rounds rattling around inside. As it turned out, the helicopter took 13 hits. Once again, Karl comes up with his crew, 75 foot, stabilized, penetrator goes down, penetrator comes back up, and then they flew off to Da Nang for a joyous reunion. I can't imagine doing that. I can't imagine the kind of courage it has to just sit there and wait for that to happen. The entire crew received a Silver Star, which is just hard to believe. I mean, it's certainly warranted, but it just doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen. The Silver Star is 1 notch below the Medal of Honor. So this is not small potatoes. As I told you at the beginning, it was the most heroic act during my time in Vietnam that I witnessed or heard about. When Dave and Doc and Gorgo got back to Phuket, we had a party that lasted probably about 3 days, and it's just an experience that still boggles my mind. I'm so glad that I got to meet Karl because that closed the loop. And back here, right next to Doc and Gorgo were rescued is Karl's signature right there, Jolly Green 65. What a treasure. What a treasure. That closes the loop right there. And I'm delighted that you were celebrating Karl's life. We in the 480 Attack Fighter Squad will always celebrate Karl's life. There's a little presentation that I gave to Eunice here, and it says on there that it talks about Karl's name, the dates, and at the bottom it says, "We'll never forget." We will never forget. Thank you.